Hello everyone, I'm Bob. I'm an elder here at CIT, and I just want to warmly welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us in our online service. We're about to have a time of worship followed by teaching. Here at CIT, we treasure the Bible, and today, Pastor Dell will be teaching from a passage in chapter 10 of Mark's Gospel. I was particularly moved by the last verse in this chapter, this passage, where Jesus says he came to give his life as a ransom for many. That speaking made this verse and this passage instantly important to me, personal. He came, he rescued me by dying for me. That's intensely personal. And the one who said that and who did that so far away and so long ago is right here, right now. He's about to speak something specific directly to each of us through this passage. I hope that you and I can open our hearts so that we can hear what he has to say to us. Before we begin, I want to point out a few practical things we have for you on our website at mycit.info. First, here we believe in prayer, and we have people who are ready to pray for you specifically. If you would like us to do that, please go to mycit.info and fill out a prayer request. Secondly, our mission here at CIT is to bring people into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. If you'd like to partner with us in that mission, one way to do it is by giving. For that, you can go to mycit.info and click on Giving. We are very grateful for your generous support, especially during this pandemic. Now, for the parents among you, you can go to mycit.info and click on CIT Kids. That link will take you to CIT videos and other resources for your children. There's also a short survey there. In that survey, you can tell us how we can support you during this difficult time. Please fill out that survey if you can. And finally, we invite you to subscribe to this video. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And if you've enjoyed this online service today, please like, comment, and share this video. We always love to hear from you. And now, let's begin by worshiping our Lord together with some help from our wonderful worship team. Enjoy, and God bless.
Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Amazing grace, this is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings. With truth and was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, 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 Jesus, I say for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your fault, still your love fought for me. lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Thank you for joining us again as we continue our series in the Gospel of Mark on discipleship. And this week we come to a portion that is the third time that Jesus announces his death and resurrection. So this is now coming to Mark chapter 10, verses 32 to verse 45. You can follow along on the screen, or if you have your own Bible, and I will read to you. They were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. The disciples were astonished, but those who followed him were afraid. Taking the 12 aside again, he began to tell them the things that would happen to him. See, we are going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death. Then they will hand him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him, and he will rise after 3 days. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, approached him and said, Teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask you. What do you want me to do for you? He asked them. They answered him, Allow us to sit at your right and at your left in your glory. Jesus said to them, You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We are able, they told him. Jesus said to them, You will drink the cup I drink, and you will be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not mine to give. Instead, it is for those for whom it has been prepared. When the 10 disciples heard this, they began to be indignant with James and John. Jesus called them over and said to them, You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in high positions act as tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become great among you will be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you will be a slave to all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So, it's interesting how this section begins with this one verse 32. As they're on the road going up to Jerusalem, Jesus is walking along, and the disciples are astonished, and those who followed him were afraid. So you have this group of people. You've got the 12 plus others who are walking with Jesus on the way up to Jerusalem. What's striking about this, we're in this whole section on discipleship in the Gospel of Mark. And this verse shows us something. And actually, the whole Gospel of Mark shows us something. What is that? Discipleship is not something that happens by itself as an individual. Discipleship happens in community. And what is that community? That community is the church. In the Gospel of Mark, the singular word disciple is never used. It's always in the plural. So this kind of helps reinforce this aspect that discipleship happens in community. And we need one another in order to advance and grow in our discipleship. If we are just by ourselves pursuing discipleship, we could end up being kind of weird, becoming kind of weird. So we need one another. We need community to see ourselves, to see one another, to help each other, to hold each other accountable, to encourage each other, and so on. Community is precious. And let's face it, that is something that we have less of these days. Yes, we have online chats, online Zooms, whatever. But the fact is, because of this pandemic, we do miss being actually together as opposed to virtually together. So we have a sense of loss. And I would say it's healthy to have a sense of loss. Why? Because we are made for community. We need community. So we almost have this feeling today, I'm in a situation that's not normal. We can't even call this a new normal. This is not normal. It's kind of feeling like we're exiled to some place without our community. And so it's okay to lament our loss. In fact, I would say we should lament our loss at this time. But on the other hand, we should do whatever we can in this time to stay connected. Join a group if you can, so that you can continue in your pathway of discipleship. So this is now the third time Jesus began to tell of his death. And this time he gives more detail. In this detail, he tells us that, first of all, he's going to be handed over by the chief priests and scribes. They will condemn him, and then they will hand him over to the Gentiles. And what happens to him then? Then they will mock him, they will spit on him, they will flog him, and eventually they will kill him. So this time, Jesus gets into more detail. This is the third time in chapters 8, 9, and 10 that Jesus speaks of his coming death. Each time that Jesus gave this declaration or pronouncement of his coming death, the disciples, or some of the disciples at least, had a reaction. Following that reaction, Jesus used their reaction to give them instruction in discipleship. So that, and that's interesting, each time it's this way. So the first time Jesus spoke, Peter rebuked Jesus, and then Jesus used that instruction to say, you need to what? Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. The second time Jesus gave his announcement, this is when the disciples were arguing about each other, who's the greatest? Jesus used that opportunity to instruct them to say, if you want to be first, you must be last, and you must be servant of all. So now we come to the third time, and this time Jesus mentions this again, his death, his resurrection. But what's different this time than all the other two times is this is the first time in Mark that Jesus says why he is going to the cross. And that is in verse 45, where he says, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." The purpose of his going to the cross was to give his life as a ransom for many. You could even say his purpose of his coming, period, was to give his life as a ransom for many. This is Jesus' clear mission statement, you might say. Mark gives this clear reason for his death. Tim Keller has this to say: the major advance in Mark 10 is that for the first time, Jesus tells us not only that he will die, but why he will do so. So, what does it mean to be a ransom? Usually when we think of ransom, we think, oh, somebody's kidnapped and the kidnappers are asking for a ransom. That's not really what the thought here is. The thought here is a debt has to be paid. And the debtor, the one who is in debt, cannot pay it. Impossible to pay. Will never be able to pay. And so Jesus comes to pay the debt, to pay the ransom, to purchase our freedom. Something we could not buy, he paid the price. What is this? This is the ultimate expression of love. The ultimate expression of love is paying the price for someone else's debt who cannot, will not ever be able to pay the debt. So Jesus, as dying on the cross as a substitutionary sacrifice, paid the ransom. This is real love, and real love is costly. If you really love somebody, it will cost you something. Mark Allen Powell also says this concerning the crucifixion of Jesus: matters most to Mark. Ultimately, Jesus has not come to heal the sick or to argue with the Pharisees, but he has come to give his life. So, what is the reaction then from the disciples in this case? Well, the reaction is James and John. James and John come to Jesus and they put out this request. Now, James and John are brothers, okay? Their father is Zebedee. So these are two brothers coming together to make this request. Let us sit on your right and on your left when in your glory. We'll get more into how Jesus handles these two characters in a moment. But here's the interesting thing. They're asking for something. They're asking to sit on Jesus' right and his left in his glory. Let me ask you this question. When was the greatest moment of the glory of Jesus shown? It was shown on the cross. The greatest moment where the glory of Jesus is shown on the cross. Who was on the right and on the left of Jesus when he was on the cross? It was two criminals. This is interesting, right? Kind of ironic. This request, we obviously have to realize this was a very inappropriate request. You have to understand, okay, these are two brothers, James and John, but actually there's three that you might say of the 12 disciples who were in the inner circle. That's Peter, James, and John, those three. These are the three who were taken up to the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus took them up there. These also were the three that Jesus took to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane, these threesome. But what do James and John do? James and John, as brothers of the same family, basically they exclude Peter and ask for some special privilege. They're seeking honor for themselves as two brothers in one family. What this shows is that they do not understand the membership in Jesus' family. Earlier in this gospel, Jesus talked about Who is my mother? Who is my brother? Who are my sisters? So Jesus actually has inaugurated in his kingdom a new family. You might call it Jesus family. Not something official, but what is this family? It's all the followers and the believers of Jesus. In the church family, we are all brothers and sisters. If in a church, the natural family, the physical family takes precedence, then what happens? Then the church is mainly a church of families. But actually the church is full of brothers and sisters. Where's the place for singles if we overemphasize the matter of family? Let me give an example of how overemphasis, or if a family has power, it can be a problem. Here in this church in the early 70s, there was a husband and wife who had quite a bit of influence. The husband was an elder, and he brought his wife into the leadership of the church. And eventually this couple had a lot of influence. Even, I'm sorry to say, they started matchmaking. Inappropriate matchmaking, I would say. Well, that was scary on the one hand. On the other hand, my realization is God cares for the church. And eventually, that couple had to leave. I won't go into those details, but eventually you realize, no, they had to leave. So, this natural family thing can become, when it becomes dominant in the church, when a family has dominance in the church, there become problems. So, obviously, the other 10 disciples became indignant. How come these two should have special privileges? So you realize that kind of what they did, James and John did, produce more problems of animosity. We have to remember, in the church, we are all just brothers and sisters. So, my question to you, have you ever been blinded by a role that you have in the church to feel that you're somewhat superior to others? In the church, we are all just brothers and sisters. There's no special status. There's no special roles. Some years ago, over 30 years ago, I was in another church, and during that time, a few of us were helping take care of the children every Sunday morning. And some of us, there was about 8 of us who were working together with the children in singing. And this one Sunday morning, I remember very clearly, I was not regularly a regular children's Sunday school teacher. But this one Sunday, it so happened that this one group of kids who were in grade 1, 2, and 3, their teacher didn't show. They were without a teacher. So I, unequipped, untrained, went in and took care of the kids for the morning. It was a very interesting time. I enjoyed it, but there was one kid there who, he couldn't sit still. So I just realized, okay, he can't sit still. It's okay. Let's go outside and play in the grass. Just taking care of children, just being a brother in the church, no special status, just doing what others do, actually is enjoyable. Okay, so how does Jesus respond to these disciples? Well, you think about this. Here are these disciples. They say, Jesus, or James and John, Jesus, we're going to ask you something, and we want you to do it. It's kind of like, you think about it, if you were Jesus, how would you deal with these characters? How would you respond? Jesus is exceptionally gracious, exceptionally patient. He's not reactionary. He just says, you don't know what you're asking. Can you endure what I'm going to endure? The cup that I will drink, the baptism that I will be baptized with. And what does that refer to? That refers to Jesus' suffering, the cup, and his death. His suffering and his death. Can you participate in that? You want that position, but do you know what I'm going to be going through? And they say, yes, we can do it. They say yes. Do they really know what they're saying yes to? Here's the striking thing. Jesus says to them, you will. You will drink the cup, and you will be baptized with a baptism. And in Acts chapter 12, James is the first of the 12 to be martyred. He's executed by King Herod. So, yes. But then Jesus said, but it's not for me to give. This place is not for me to give. Jesus is in submission to the Father. He is in absolute submission to the Father. He doesn't ask for anything. And as disciples, submission also should be a hallmark of our discipleship. We're in submission to God. So, Jesus then goes on, starting in verse 42, to give instruction on discipleship. Jesus gives instruction on discipleship. So he says, verse 42, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in high positions act as tyrants over them, but it is not so among you. So, Mark's gospel does not spend a lot of time on this matter of leadership. But here he does address this matter of leadership. And what does he do? He compares the worldly leaders to how we should be. The worldly leaders they lord it over people. But he said that should not be the way among you. What instead? So the ESV Study Bible has this to say: the disciples are to be marked by humility of service, not by wanting to lord it over those for whom they are responsible. So he continues in the end of verse 43, whoever wants to become great among you will be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you will be slave to all. So, you know what's striking is this same thought Peter has in his epistle. He says to the elders, he says, shepherd the flock of God among you, not overseeing of compulsion, but willingly. Verse 3, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. Not lording it, but being examples. So, what does this mean? He says, and then he says in verse 45, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. What is a disciple? It is a person who serves, who doesn't expect to be served. We're servants. He says, whoever wants to be great among you, be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you will be a slave to all. So, you want to be great? Be a servant. You want to be first? Be a slave. As disciples of Jesus, we serve. We don't think about being served. We exercise, which is the same thought all through this section, these chapters 8 and 9 and 10. What is that? Self-denial, self-sacrifice, a life of serving, a life of putting others first. Albina Barrera says this, true power is not in oppressing or dominating others. Rather, true power is in serving and even suffering with Jesus for others. Thus, disciples are imbued with a new way of thinking. They surrender their lives rather than pampering themselves. They serve rather than demand to be served. They seek to be last rather than the first. The people who are a life of service. Some years ago, in one of our congregations, their meeting, they had a lunch every Sunday. And after the lunch, one of the elders every Sunday went to wash dishes. What was he? He was an example. He was willing to serve. He was willing to be an example to others. So during this time of this unusual time that we're in, abnormal time that we're in, we still have to ask the question, how can I serve others? How can I serve others? Let me just give you some different ways. You have a phone. You can call people. If a person comes to mind, that's the indicator for you to call them, to talk to them. You can pray. Pray for people who come to mind. Pick up groceries for seniors. I know this story. This one senior among us was having trouble with the computer, so somebody came to her door. She handed the computer at the door, and he worked on her computer while keeping physical distance. So what can we do? I'd just like to share a personal testimony. During this time, things are really different, right? And I noticed that I was not spending as much money on some things as I usually did. And the Lord touched me. During this time, there are people who are doing without. And I received notices from Scott Mission because they have unusually heavy load of people in need. So I realized, okay, instead of spending more money on myself, how about I give money? Since I can't do a lot of physical things, maybe I should just give some money. And then we can just do other expressions of love. I had this wonderful couple among us who made my wife and I a loaf of bread and dropped it off at our house. So sweet, so precious, just loved it. What is that? That is an expression of love. Do I really need bread? Look at me, I don't really need bread. But it was an expression of love, and I really appreciated it. It was so, so sweet. So we can do all kinds of even little things to care for one another, to support one another, pray for one another, call one another. Let's use this time to serve others and not expect to be served. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for coming to be a ransom for us. Your death on the cross was the ultimate expression of love, the ultimate expression of service. So, Lord, you have called us to be your disciples, and we want to joyfully serve others as you have served. Lord, grant us this grace this week to consider, Lord, how can I reach out to someone? Whether it's a phone call, whether it's a Zoom chat, whether it's a text. Lord, help me to think about others this week. Help us all to consider others. We ask this in your dear and precious name. Amen.